The sun, moon, and rising make up the big three, as it's called in the natal chart, because they are such crucial placements. However, they definitively and distinctively mean separate things, so let's clear this up. If you are excited to dive into this full examination of what the sun, moon, and rising differentiate themselves as and mean in astrology, make sure that you like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so that you are always up to date with what the stars have in store for you. This video is brought to you by the very own Astrology Academy. I've been working on this course extensively for this year, prepping it, really refining it, and intensively making sure that it catered to my students and what I would want to see in a foundational astrology course. All of the information for enrollment is below, along with my Actually Learning Astrology webinar. It's a webinar to get you started in, if you're dipping your toe into astrology and you want to see if it's something you want to learn more about, the Actually Learning Astrology webinar is an hour-long webinar you can sign up for down below. I would love to have you learn and hear about that from me, but also for the Academy, that's below everything, so that if you want to check those out, learning lots below, I am providing. So, hi there, I'm Maren. I am a professional astrologer, author, and current philosophy student. I combine traditional Hellenistic astrological techniques with modern psychological counseling dynamics in order to provide grounded spiritual guidance. I do want to say before we get started that this video came from questions from viewers and subscribers just like you who were wondering what is the difference between sun, moon, and rising. So if during this video or any other video you do have questions you want me to address, make sure you leave them below so that I do get a chance to read them and to see if they would make a really good video, because I'm here to answer your questions and guide you, so you really are the voice. As well, on my Instagram every Wednesday I answer astrology questions on Mercury's day, more like individual, just like quick questions. So you can check me out there if you're not following me there already on Instagram. I answer a lot of questions, but here specifically, if you do have like major questions, if you do comment them, I do take them into account. So we're going to start out with the ascendant or rising sign. I just did a full video on what the houses mean in astrology, which I will link down below. So make sure that after this video you watch that one, because I'm just going to get to the tip of the surface of what the first house means in describing the ascendant, which falls in the first house. So that's a great video to understand more why the ascendant is different than the sun and the moon. So the rising sign was the entire zodiac sign rising over the eastern horizon at your time of birth, setting up your entire natal chart. That is why it's the most crucial or personal point in the chart, so to speak. By personal, I in no way mean that it's the core essence of you, or it's like the only thing that you would resonate with, or that you have to resonate with it. Nothing in astrology can be simplified down or designated as the true you. If it sounds too good to be true like that, that's nothing in life is that simple or that direct. However, the rising sign is the most you indicator in the symbolic map of you. On a technical basis, it is the most crucial and important, only because it sets up the entire backbone of the houses in the chart. Wherever the rising ascendant degree falls, sets up the rising sign, and therefore where all of the planets are going to fall into a house. The houses describe the areas of life that each of the planetary alignments will fall in, so that is why the rising sign and the ascendant is so crucial, because it's literally setting up the rest of the chart. So like, don't ask whether it's the most important in terms of your personality or like the true you or anything, because one, a chart is not just your internal world, it's a map of your life. Like, the unit of a chart is not a psychology, it's of a life, which includes both internal and external dynamics. And two, it's just more specifically the most technically important point in the chart. Not because it overpowers other components, but because it's crucial to where the other components even end up being. So I just wanted to really nail that in so that there's not people being like, I don't resonate, but it's important. Like, it's not about that. And by ascendant, we mean the specific degree of your rising sign that was rising over the eastern horizon. So the ascendant is like in the rising sign, it's the particular degree. It was the ascending degree. The entire rising sign is your whole sign first house, and the specific degree that was rising is your ascendant. It's the most sensitive bodily you point in the chart. And the ascendant or rising sign sets up how all transits in the future will fall in your natal chart. Like, horoscopes or forecasts are all based on rising. Like, even if an astrologer doesn't even realize it, they are writing everything always most based on rising, because it's how transits fall. And I did a full video on how you're reading your horoscope wrong, differentiating the sun and rising roles in a chart as well a little bit. So I do recommend that you watch that video down below after this one. So like I've said, houses are specific areas of life. And the first house being the point in which your soul entered your body, so to speak, the sky meets the earth, where you took your first breath, really relates to yourself, your body, and your character. It is the life spirit that animates you both physically and your character in the world. It is highly, highly personal. And any planet close to your ascendant will really designate a type of quality to you. So that if you have any planets in the first house, especially very close to the ascendant, they tend to be really big indicators of the kind of energy that we manifest as. The planetary ruler of the sign of your ascendant and its placement will directly relate further to you and your vitality. And the house placement of the ruler of the ascendant tends to steer the ship of your life into the direction of that area of life. So for example, my first house is Capricorn, I'm a Capricorn rising, Saturn rules Capricorn, Saturn is in my 5th house of creativity and of, creativity is mostly the way that it shows up, in that I take a very Saturnian regimented approach, but I'm a very creative person, and so that's a direction in my life. The ruler of the ascendant is the helm steering the ship that is the rising sign designating you. So yeah, it's the most indicative you point in a chart is the rising sign, in terms of like your location and where you show up in the map of your life. For thousands of years, up until about 100 years ago, when people were like, what's your sign? They were referring to your rising sign. The rising sign changes every 2.5 hours, the sun changes every 30 days. It's an accident of history that we now look at the sun sign as this horoscope, like, pop culture thing, but for thousands of years when people kind of more understood that we weren't just one sign, we are looking at a symbolic map of many placements and many signs, when they were just like, what's your sign? It was like rising sign, because that was the most personal. It changes every 2.5 hours. And because the houses are areas of life, and the first house is the body and the self, and the ascendant is the direct point in which that sign was coming up over the eastern horizon, is the most sensitive bodily you identity point in the chart. And because placements and the ruler of the ascendant and different planets on the ascendant can heavily mitigate the way that that sign manifests, it doesn't really matter more or less whether or not you resonate with the idea of that sign. Because whether or not you in this moment resonate with it, I mean, it can be something that fluctuates over time, it can depend on the planetary ruler. There are many different reasons why the idea that you might have of the sign itself doesn't resonate with you. Regardless of that, the indicator of the ascendant is the most indicative of you in the chart. So instead of thinking of the chart of a map of your psychology, think of it as a map of your life that is activated in different parts over time. You show up as the first house, the ascendant, and the placement of the ascendant ruler, more or less. And the fact that the ascendant directly relates to an area of life, and that area of life is you and your body and yourself, differentiates it from the planets. The planets are more archetypal and they're more archetypal and general in their meanings as they apply to specific charts. And I want to be clear now in the get-go describing the sun and the moon. They will most fully represent whatever houses they rule. Every planet and the sun and the moon rules houses. Whatever sign is a whole sign house, it has a planetary ruler, so that planet will rule the topics of that house. The sun rules and represents whatever house Leo is in your chart, and the moon rules and represents whatever house Cancer is in your chart. The house rulerships of one planet ruling one house placed in another house is how we weave together chart analysis and delineations of storylines. And the Astrology Academy, shameless plug, leads you up after several months to be able to delineate that. It's an advanced concept, but I can't lie and say that the sun and the moon mean specific things when more specifically they're going to rule whatever houses they're signifying in your chart. Planets have their inherent meanings, which color the ways that their house rulerships manifest. So you can watch my full video on what the houses mean, which will be linked down below, and that'll help you understand what ways in which the sun and the moon's meanings apply to whatever house they rule. So first and foremost, the sun will most directly correspond to the house topics of the whole sign house of Leo. If Leo is your first house, it'll represent yourself. If Leo is your second house, it'll represent your money, things like that. The sun will represent those things, I mean. However, on its own, in just its archetype, the sun often represents egoic creativity, like something we're striving towards creating or actualizing. It is very much a story arc that is motivating. It is based on achievement and rank and wanting to enlighten or illuminate something, because the sun is the center of the solar system. Everything revolves around it. So it's often a feeling of being called towards embodying or actualizing ourselves in a certain way. It's something we're moving towards or aspirationally often called to. It's less about, I am this sign, and more of, I see myself becoming or playing a role that corresponds to the archetype of that sign. It can represent on its own in a chart father or masculine authority figures, because the sun is a very powerful, consistent force, and if we had a powerful, consistent masculine authority figure growing up, the sun can represent that in our chart sometimes, especially when it's hit by transit. can indicate what we are noble or intellectually honored for. It's recognition, mental, intellectual recognition, like career-based acknowledgement is often what I see the sun representing, more so than anything personal or anything really like identifiable on its own. The sun is the means by which things are allowed to appear, like it allows things to be visible in the universe, and so whatever house topics that the sun is ruling are often very visible or very publicized in our lives. And it's not as personal to your identity or like your flavor, the sun sign, unless you're a Leo rising, and therefore the sun is literally ruling your first house of self. So Leo risings have it pretty easily, honestly. The sun is ruling their first house of self, so it's, yeah. That's not to say that you can't resonate with your sun sign. Like, resonance can mean so many different things. I hella resonate with my Virgo sun, but I see myself more like in my personality and my characteristics and mannerisms being very much my Capricorn rising, but that I definitely am striving towards being a diligent critic of knowledge in the way that my Virgo sun in the 9th house is a striving towards. And then first and foremost, the moon will represent whatever whole sign house topics Cancer corresponds with in that part of your chart. So for example, if the moon is ruling your 4th house, it will represent home and family. If it's ruling your 5th house, it will represent children and creativity. So that will be more chart specific for you. The moon is also the most impermanent indicator in the sky. The moon only spends about 2.5 days in each sign, so its phase is constantly changing, like new moon, full moon, it's just always changing very, very quickly. It's the kind of background noise in the sky and in our chart. So it reflects things that are constantly changing, like bodily cycles, our health, our mood, and it can also represent the coming to being and passing away of things. It's a point in our chart that's very cyclical, which, yes, I think that it makes sense why a lot of modern acknowledgement of it is of the inner emotional world, but I don't want it to be thought of as simply as your emotions or at all like a deepest part of you. It's not the true you. There is no like true you in a chart. The chart is a map to many different components, both of you internally and externally, but the moon is not just clearly like your emotions, you process them this way. It's what is the way that you recalibrate? What is your background noise always pulling towards? It's very much impulsive cycles. Like when you're disoriented, your moon is often both what emotionally and what in a practical way you take acknowledge of. Because if your moon is, my moon is in Libra, and when I feel out of whack, I usually do more intellectualize it and look towards what is just gonna ease conflict rather than looking to like weep or something. Like I'm very much a like what is the game plan of returning to center, and that's my Libra moon in a way, but it's ruling my 7th house of relationship, so often it's like what do I need to, I'm very good at mediation. But it can also represent mother or maternal figures. It is a nurturing, the moon represents our manifest reality and bringing things into being, nurturing. And so with it ruling, whatever house it's ruling can also represent like house topics associated with our mother and where our mother might have come from, or a maternal figure in general. I know in my chart, the moon represents more my father because he played more the mother role in my life. It can represent travel, like the moon's position can indicate what we are always doing busily or traveling around. And it's, like this impulsive drive towards safety and homeostasis, but in no way is it like the true or the deepest or the soul, like blech. I mean, define true, define soul, like define these things. It's easy to define way in which we find, like we can define the way in which we tend to find emotional centeredness. That's something we can define. I mean, that for thousands of years, philosophers have been debating what the soul or like the truth is. So I don't even go there with astrology. I just see it as, it's the way that you recalibrate back to center. And it's the Cancer part of your chart, whatever whole sign house Cancer rules, the moon is representing that. And it's often your connection to that area of life and the way that finding your emotional homeostasis involves parts of honoring that part of your life. And as you can see, the planetary energies are more about invoking an idea and building up like a form or an archetype around it. I don't want to say they're more abstract, but they're more extraneous, and they take a bit more musing, and they're a bit more encompassing of being malleable, because the sun and the moon will most specifically refer to whatever house topics they rule in your chart. So do look at my previous video on the houses for that. Like, don't ask, I ruled this house, what does that mean? Just look at the house topics video and look that up. But I know that it's more complex and it's less easily clickbait to describe it like this, but this is how actual astrology manifests, is that it's complex, it's nuanced, it's rigorous, and it's not just like moon emotions like sun, you, ascendant, mask. No. Actually, I want to flat out say the ascendant is not a mask. Ugh, no, there's no mask necessarily in the chart. There is, ascendant is you, marker is you. And the ascendant is just more clearly like a boom, pop, that is your body and your identity. It's a stagnant, like you. Whereas the sun and the moon, they mean several different things and they can be more complex. So if you enjoyed this and you want to check out my private readings, all the info will be down below. I'm not sure right now if I will be open for readings or if there will be a wait list, but either way, the information will be down below for you to join or enroll in either. Info for my Actually Learning Astrology webinar will be down below if you want to join us for that. I'd love to have you learning with us about that. Also, Astrology Academy, if you already know you want to like deep dive into months of learning this and live calls with me and just like nitty gritty, it's my baby and I'm so proud of it and would love to have you join if you're interested. Otherwise, make sure that you like, subscribe, and let me know your experience with your sun, moon, or rising in the comments. I would like to hear how maybe you feel about the way that they manifest in your chart or what they rule and the ways in which the archetypes come through those house rulerships. So I'm interested. Otherwise, sending all the love and I will see you in the next video.
There is one thing you're all